Good Evening Ghana is brought to you by Castlegate Company Limited.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to this edition of Good Evening Ghana. Thank you very much for your time. Tonight, we are talking about the state of Ghana's economy. As we advertise, we have put together a magazine program for you to see how the NDC and the NPP, I should say the opposition NDC and the governing NPP, both presented different aspects of Ghana's economy. One presented a photograph of an expectant future and a stabilized macroeconomic environment. The other presented a photograph of a former better situation than now. Tonight we will juxtapose the two pictures that were presented by the NDC and the NPP for you to make your own analysis and for you to make a decision. We have to say, though, that there's more of the NPP events which occurred yesterday because we actually had more time in putting that together. But we have also brought you the best of what happened at the NDC event today, which ended just a few hours ago. We managed to slip in some of that as well so that you can have a balanced view of the matter. As they say, media is obligated to present a balanced opinion of political parties on how they see the state of the economy. So yesterday, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, in a widely advertised program, which was advertised, of course, for 3rd of April, presented to Ghanaians with his economic management team the state of Ghana's economy. And he read a speech for about an hour and 20 minutes, and then he also allowed questions, which was the most important part, questions to be answered by his team. And then today, the opposite occurred. Both events happening in Accra on the 2 different days. The National Democratic Congress, the leading opposition party, led by, of course, President Mahama was at the event. And several times he was referred to by his colleagues as president of Ghana. Adongo, the Honorable Isaac Adongo, who gave us a good interview some time back, and we were very happy to be in his office that day, also gave his idea, his understanding of the state of the economy. Afterwards, other people spoke on the Adongo platform, and that included the former Deputy Minister of Finance, the Honorable Monacote, whose speech we liked, and so we'll be showing you the full version of that. So let's start our magazine program. So this is how it's going to go. So we will watch a little bit, we'll come to the studio and try and understand what we've watched, then we'll go back and watch again and come and try and understand this event at the College of Surgeons. It seemed like a very interesting time when people were asking questions of Dr. Bawumia, and he was also delegating those questions to various members of the economic team to answer. So in that part of the magazine, you will hear from the Honorable Minister for Trade and Industry, the Honorable Alan Chemating. You will hear from the Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, the Minister of Finance. You will hear from the minister that we all want to hear from right now, the Honorable Peter Meu, the Minister for Energy. And you would also hear from the Honorable Yao Safo Mafo, as well as the Honorable Dr. Owusu Efriye Akoto, who is the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Agriculture. We also identify something at yesterday's event. The Honorable Yao Safo Mafo spoke, and he spoke in an endorsement of Dr. Bawumia, but he appeared to be answering a question about rumors. There's been widely raging rumors about the relationship between Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia as the head of the economic management team, the Honorable Yao Safo Mafo, who is senior minister and former finance minister, and also the incumbent finance minister, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta. Honorable Yao Safo Mafo seemed to have spoken in direct response to that rumor. We'll have a look at what he said. So let's begin with Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. Now, in this presentation, he sort of sets out, this is just a 4 minutes video of our magazine program. He sets out the whole economic situation that the NPP inherited. Let's have a look.
Thank you very much. Secretary to the EMT, the Vice President of the Republic is about addressing us.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand on existing protocol. Good morning. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to share with you some progress on the state of our economy after 2 years in government, during which we have been implementing the policies that Ghanaians voted for. This occasion also provides the economic management team an opportunity to interact with the public and to answer questions on the economy. The timing of this interaction is also important because it was only yesterday that Ghana formally and successfully completed the IMF program that we inherited in 2017. On behalf of members of the EMT, I present to you our progress, where we are, and the way forward. Our presentation today, as always, is based on an analysis of the data and the facts. The data will speak for itself. If you disagree, you should bring your own data and your record. But don't disagree by saying that the EMT members have big heads. You only resort to insults when you are allergic to facts. First, let me recall briefly the state of the economy we inherited and how far we have come since 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of Ghana's recurrent economic difficulties has been the management of public finances, especially during election years, and the challenges in cleaning up the post-election mess. Our public financial management and our fiscal excesses, particularly in the run-up to the 2012 elections, was very damaging to our prospects of managing the economy that is trying to climb up the middle income ladder. The economy ended 2012 with a fiscal deficit of 12.2% of GDP, 2011 of 11.7% of GDP deficit, and 2013 of 11.7% of GDP, and 2014 of 11.9% of a fiscal deficit, before falling to 6.7% in 2015, but rose again to 9.3% in 2016. We recorded in this period, for the first time in Ghana's history, double-digit fiscal deficits in 3 consecutive years, and plunged into a deep fiscal hole. The debt pileup began, debt service became burdensome on the budget, inflation soared, external trade balances worsened, and the economy became more and more vulnerable to external shocks. This poor state of public finances, weak implementation, and lack of policy credibility resulted in Ghana requesting an IMF bailout in August 2014. The 2012 to the 2016 period was much, much worse, even though the external environment was favorable.
So as we said, we're having a magazine program tonight. So that's how Dr. Bawumia yesterday introduced his perspectives, or the MPP's perspectives, on the state of the economy. So in the video that you just saw, he sort of set out the basis on what the NPP inherited as they came into office from the NDC. He made a calculation and provided some data on what happened between 2012 and 2016. So later on in this program, we will see what he said about what the MPP is hoping to do and the various aspects of the economy that the MPP was going to attack. A lot of that happened in the questions time. So as I said, that's really the part that you should wait for, because we have edited all the interesting questions and all the interesting answers. We will have no opinion on the matter tonight. We want you to make your own views on the matter. Next time we come on Tuesday, perhaps we'll talk about it. Of course, but we were aware that the NDC was going to respond, because they had advertised, even ahead of the MPP event, that they were certainly going to respond. And so this afternoon at the Mensvik Hotel, the NDC did respond. It was led by Adongo, but it was encouraging to see that all the NDC bigwigs were at the event. This, our camera, captured the introduction by Felix Kwachiofosu of all the NDC bigwigs that were at the event. Let's have a look at who and whom was at the NDC event.
We also have a former minister, a former deputy minister of finance, and member of parliament for the Ejumako Enyan Esiam constituency, Honorable Ato Forsen. Thank you very much, Honorable. Unlike yesterday, when there was no female presence at a lecture organized ostensibly to tell us about what we already know about the Ghanaian economy, we have endeavored to ensure a level playing field. We have been sensitive for the requirement of gender balance. And therefore, we have two distinguished ladies who are poised to rub shoulders with the men and show their mettle. The first amongst them is a former minister of education, and currently the chancellor of the Women's University in Africa, and also a former vice chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman. Thank you very much, madam, for coming. Completing the cast is a former deputy minister of finance, Madam Monakoti. Thank you very much for coming, madam. Without taking any more of your time, ladies and gentlemen, I would invite the Honorable Isaac Adongo to make his presentation.
Okay, so that was the big introduction that happened today, a few hours ago, at the Mensvik Hotel in Accra. That was the NDC event. Those who are just joined us, we are just doing a magazine sort of presentation of what happened yesterday and today. The government, the NPP, yesterday presented by the economic management team the state of affairs in Ghana's economy as they saw it. And today there was a response by the NDC. We've done our best to present to you videos of both events, and you see it. We have selected a high point of all the aspects of the magazine to be the part that we'll show you last, which is the question time at the College of Surgeons yesterday, where people ask questions of the government. And of course, we think that the government has a bigger obligation than the opposition. So we have selected that to show you as a bulk of the program. Before then, though, we have showed you Dr. Bawumia's introduction, in which he said the state of the economy as was inherited by his party, the MPP. We'll come back to Dr. Bawumia when he tells us about what the MPP decided to do within the context of Ghana Beyond Aid and freeing the economy of the Gadgesbeck shackles as well. He discussed that as well. But Honorable Adongo had a lot to say and a lot of interesting things to say. We thought that this was the most piercing and very direct statement of the Honorable Adongo, which he spoke about somewhere in the middle of his speech as captured by the cameras. Here's Honorable Adongo in that very short, tight, but quite piercing response to the government.
So apart from having this challenge that has to be addressed in order to give Ghana independence in terms of policy making and in terms of our ability to manage the vulnerabilities of our country, we are now dependent on 2 or 3 investors who can manage us like kids. If they decide that their interest is now better served in Southeast Asia and they come to take their money, the city will disappear. This is the state of our Ghanaian economy. And this is not the one to be celebrating. But only recently they came to celebrate what they call the hat trick. Mr. President, that was a hat trick of embarrassment. You see, the first one is that they were celebrating the stability of the city. How can you celebrate something that has just, you see somebody is sick, you take him to the hospital, you inject him. You don't even have the cure. He comes so he gets better for 1 week, and you say you have stabilized, you are coming to celebrate. The next morning, the person dies. So, at the time they were celebrating, the city was secretly climbing back to where it belongs. And now we are back to our record. The worst performing currency, not just in Africa, but the fourth worst in the whole world. And we were celebrating this embarrassment with kinky and fish.
We're celebrating the currency depreciation with kinky and fish, as he said. He said the currency also is now the fourth worst performing. And the NDC made a lot of meal about the currency because in the run-up to 2016 election, we understand, we remember, all of us do remember when Dr. Bawumia made the currency a big issue. In fact, he sought to explain at yesterday's event in a certain way that you will find out when we show you in the magazine program. As we said, we are not passing any comments tonight, and so we just want to show you so you can make your own decision. We have selected out of the NDC presentation this evening, also because we are constrained by time in presenting it. We have selected what we thought was a presentation that really captured the whole atmosphere. It was a presentation by the former Deputy Minister of Finance, the Honorable Adom-Otchere. Of course, on this program, we are a bit gender biased in favor of women in politics because we'd like to encourage women to get into politics because apparently they do better than men when women get into politics. So we're delighted by the NDC's representation of women. We were not so excited by the MPP's lack of women and the economic management team, which has been pointed out by many people. I'm sure that the MPP has taken note of it. Please get women into the economic management team, New Patriotic Party. President Akufo-Addo is a gender champion. Let's see some women coming in. And you do have some great women as well. I mean, Honorable Esla Usu is Minister of Communication, and I thought that communication was significant enough to get into the economic management team. Hopefully she'll get in very soon. But yes, we applaud the NDC for showing off some women in the economic management team. We'll be showing you the 7-minute presentation that was done to the NDC audience, including President Mahama, by the Honorable Adom-Otchere. Before then, though, let's go back, as we're doing a magazine program, let's go back to the College of Surgeons, where Dr. Bawumia, after setting out what the NPP inherited, now discusses what the MPP decided to do about it and the various silos in which they have put their implementation plan. He sets it out quite nicely. Here is Dr. Bawumia yesterday.
The overarching objective is to build a modern, prosperous, and private sector-driven economy anchored on a vision of Ghana beyond aid. The overarching objective will be broken down into a number of sub-objectives, and I will address this particular town hall following these sub-objectives. The pursuit of stable macroeconomy, pursuing inclusive transformation to help the poor and the vulnerable in our society and ensure social equity, pursuing the formalization of the economy by leveraging technology for digitization, enhancing the ease of doing business to remove bottlenecks that impeded the private sector development, reforming and enhancing the competitiveness of our ports. And this is where I will talk about port reform and announce some measures that the cabinet has taken. And transforming the structure of the economy through diversification, technological innovation, and greater value addition in our production processes. All these are to be supported by building a sound banking system, strengthened infrastructural investment, and good governance, especially in fighting corruption. Let me share with you our progress on this front.
So that was Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Now, in that video that you just saw, he sort of set out the MPP's implementation plan, what they've been trying to achieve over the last 2 years. And he sets also out in some detail, in almost an hour of a speech, in detail in what he thinks the MPP has done. Our interest, however, was with the questions, because the questions were categorized almost in those silos that Dr. Bawumia presented. And people asked their questions, and during the question time, he actually invited the relevant ministers to speak to the issues, and that's where I think that the big story is, and that's where our team thought that the big story was. So we'll show you that. So we move back in our magazine program, moving back and forth to the NDC now. And after the Honorable Adongo's presentation, which he said over and over again in terms of how the Bank of Ghana's rate affected the confidence of investors, in terms of how the NDC had left a macroeconomic stable environment, in terms of how the MPP government had overborrowed and had not been able to achieve anything, in terms especially of how he boasted that the NDC government under President Mahama had achieved significant infrastructural development, but there's nothing to be seen from the MPP over the last 2 years in spite of what he called excessive borrowing. So these were the high points of the Honorable Adongo's presentation, something that we already know. What excited us as we looked at it was this 7-minute presentation by the Honorable Adom-Otchere. She is a former deputy minister of finance and economic planning at the ministry, and she made a presentation to the NDC group. When we come back, we'll go back to MPP in terms of the places that we have selected for you, and then you will see it. Here's Adom-Otchere. It's about 7 minutes long. She spoke to the NDC faithful earlier today.
Picking from Uncle Ebo's play that is coming soon. But really, oh Baumia, why? The NDC government, led by both Professor Mills and President John Mahama, left an economy that was ready to take off. Every work that had to be done for fiscal discipline, macroeconomic stability was in place for the bright future. We had a government that came in and dimmed the light. Mr. President, today we hear the Vice President speak about certain port reforms and custom policies. Honorable Atuforson has taken us through some of that, so I won't go too deep. But I want to say that some of those measures, as of today, are suspect. The measures that we had in place were simply aborted and not made to work. Again, when we look at macroeconomic stability, when you've been given all the factors to take off, you rather reverse every factor, as has been mentioned by Honorable Adongo, Honorable Kwete, John Jinapor, and Atuforson. They talk about an inclusive transformation agenda. This is a lazy approach to macroeconomic stability, a lazy approach to building our economy. To be honest, I think most of them were just derived out of the SDGs. No thought, not much thought at all, went into that. Some of it was just copied from the many policies that we had in place and which we had begun to achieve. I have to say that, in fact, this current government lacks awareness because they seem to be totally not in touch with the ground. They lack understanding, and in spite of their PhDs, they lack knowledge. In fact, yes, they have purposely misled not only their own, but they have misled all of Ghana. Because at the beginning, a few Ghanaians thought that perhaps they may have some good tricks under their sleeve, but they have shown that they just have bad tricks and they are just up to mischief. Indeed, we see that in public financial management, they are good with giving definitions. But we know that it's a balancing act. We know that it's about balancing your assets and your liabilities. They have proved beyond doubt that even that they cannot do. They have brought down the banking industry. They complain about ENI gas project, the very project that will bring you gas so that you can produce energy cheaper. You complain and make derogatory remarks. This was a project that came in under President Mahama through a World Bank partial risk guarantee, a flagship financing structure. They messed it up. This balancing act is a continuous one. When we came, Ghana was in its winter season. It was dark. The external environment was terrible. Everything was difficult, but we worked hard through the winter to bring us to the point where at springtime we could all bloom as a nation. It didn't matter who would lead. President Mahama gave up peacefully just so that we would enjoy springtime. Today, we are still in winter. There is still doomsday. Exchange rate is where it is. No matter what kind of logic the Vice President tries to come up with. The balancing act now is in jeopardy. Ghana, like a ship, is now astray in turbulent waters. This is a real pity. Oh, Baumia, why? Again, using the compass of balance, we see the Vice President coming out with a one-sided measure to make importers happy, to maybe, as Honorable Atu says, to make the dealers, auto part dealers at Abosokai happy. But in fact, this is the second time he's tricking them. And soon, they will give him what they must give him, which is, no thank you, go away. In fact, in real life, it's all about prosperity. My brothers here today have spoken to the numbers and to the data that the Vice President spoke about, but which he compared in a very negative way. So all I'll say is that we are not seeing the evidence of prosperity. We are rather seeing a lot of difficulty because faulty logic has been used to describe a situation which was going to take off and they have mischievously brought down. Again, when I think of the attitude of the Minister of Finance and the Vice President, leaders of an economic management team, I am afraid for the future and they must go soon. Baumia, why? I want to mention two things that the Vice President did not mention in his speech, but are very important. The first one is to do with environmental issues. Environmental issues were very dear to the heart of the NDC. Today, what do we see? We see a country with big cities that is full of filth, plastic bottles in our rivers and in our seas. No effort to build recycling plants to recycle this into something that we can use. We see the utility companies going down. Honorable Jinapo just spoke about ECG. This week we heard what happened at Ghana Water. Just to change filters, that has not been done. And soon we'll be drinking water, which is not potable, coming out of our pipes. In Tema, there's raw sewage even backing up into buildings. Oh, Baumia, why? The last thing I want to talk about is on gender issues. We were all surprised when one of the forerunners of the Akufo-Addo Baumia regime was let go as the Minister for Women and Children, gender, whatever. We were very surprised. This was a woman who was really pushing that ministry forward, I must say, even though she was not one of us as NDC, she was a strong woman who pushed that ministry. She was let go. And today, what do we see? We see that ministry just adopting children rather than solving the situation. We see the ministry not able to work with the security agencies to find missing girls, to resolve issues amongst women, but rather they have allowed all those things to slip, and it's all been a talk shop. Oh, Baumia, why?
You heard the rhyme. I won't repeat it. But that was a presentation by Honorable Adom-Otchere. So as we said tonight, we're giving you a magazine feel of what happened yesterday and today about the state of Ghana's economy so that perhaps you can make your own decision. Sometime on Tuesday, we can come back here and as it were, talk about it and analyze it. We now go to what we think Dr. Honorable Yaosafo Mafo, the senior minister, was doing. It appeared that he was responding to some gossip. And there's been a lot of gossip around town, around newsrooms, around politicians, around journalists about the relationship between the Vice President, Honorable Mahamudu Bawumia, who is the head of the Economic Management Team, Senior Minister Yaosafo Maafo, who is, of course, senior to Dr. Bawumia in politics and is a former finance minister, and I have to add, is a former successful finance minister, and also Ken Ofori-Atta, who it was widely rumored introduced Dr. Bawumia to the politics of the MPP in 2008. Now, Ken Ofori-Atta is the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. Honorable Yaosafo Maafo is the senior minister, fundamentally responsible for many things, but especially finance and economic planning. And Dr. Bawumia is the vice president and economic policy analyst from the Bank of Ghana, who is also the chairman of the economic management team. Rumors were rife about the relationship between these three men. Honorable Yaosafo Maafo, speaking at yesterday's event, appeared to be responding to these rumors, and this is what he had to say.
I would want all of us here to, and on behalf of my colleagues, say a very big thank you to the type of leadership the EMT has enjoyed from Dr. Bawumia. A chairman who is so involved in the work of he works like a member, like a secretary. It's sterling quality, professionally excellent. So we are where we are because Dr. Bawumia is putting up a very professional chairmanship to the EMT. And I pray that we continue to work together as a team.
Okay, so was that, do you agree with me that that was a response to a rumor and gossip going around, and did he really settle the matter? I don't know. And I can't say, but that's all for your consumption and for your intake. Now we go to the most important part of the program. It's 9:45 now, and we have what we've edited into almost a full hour of the big part of yesterday's event at the conference center at the College of Surgeons. We'll take a short break. When we come back, I'll introduce you to that session. It's a session of ordinary people, you and I, asking questions of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Some questions were particularly tough, and I want you to gauge the answers and make a determination whether the answers were reasonable, whether they were logical, and whether they satisfied you. And you can send us a text on our Facebook page at Good Evening Ghana Official, where I know that most of you are watching, especially those abroad who join us by Facebook. Thank you very much for spending your data to watch our program every now and then. We are grateful, and we will now take a break, come back and look at that part. Here's our short break.
Living among your peers in a serene gated community with tarred roads, drains, electricity, piped water supply and 24-hour security can be so relieving. That is the experience you will enjoy when you reserve the Castle Residency plots located near Prampram Beach and Katamanso near Adom-Otchere. Just pay up to 60% deposit and start construction to start enjoying Prampram Beach and Airport City life. You can start with any deposit. We give you a whopping 10% discount if you make an outright payment. The Castle Residency plots are managed by Castlegate Estate Ghana Limited. Locate our offices at Katamanso Estate site off the Adom-Otchere Dodua Road or Prampram Beach Road next to Oasis International School, or contact us on 0545 559928, our website on www.castlegateestate.com.gh, or email us at info@castlegateestate.com.gh. The Castle Residency Plots. We make home ownership easier.
Welcome back to the program, and as I said, we're taking you to the most important part of our conversation tonight. It's about the question and answer. So in this event that was presented by the government at the College of Surgeons yesterday, they allowed people to ask questions, and when the questions came, they were directed to the relevant ministers. We go now back to the College of Surgeons, where Dr. Bawumia is chairing the event. Now, this happened after he had spoken on those different presentations of how the MPP intended to implement its plan to salvage Ghana's economy, to create stability for the macroeconomic environment, and hopefully that should transfer to the microeconomic environment, and also to be backed, as Dr. Bawumia said, by a sound and strong banking sector. Here are the questions that people asked him yesterday, and these are the answers that was provided by members of his economic management team.
So as randomly as possible, if you have a question for the economic management team led by His Excellency the Vice President. It's a good time to raise your hand wherever you are. We'll take a first set of about 6 questions, and then we will proceed to get responses, and then we will take some more. Prof, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself for the benefit of those who don't know you and your constituency, and then please, let's hear your question.
My name is Peter Forte with ISA, University of Ghana. Your Excellency, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. My question is very simple. How does all this decent macro figures translate to jobs? How many jobs have we created in the past year or 2? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
My name is Kofi Lucas. I represent network of associations of registered NGOs in Ghana. This is a good presentation, Your Excellency. My question is it possible to decentralize the economic management team to the regions and to at least the district? And we should be able to name it Strategic Thinkers Forum. Is it possible?
Yeah, my name is Dr. Eric Otiabe, Department of Economics, KNUST. Having listened to the performance of the economy, I want to know what the government is doing to ensure we do not find ourselves back to the IMF extended credit facility issue. There are always doubts about government fiscal prudence in election year. That's the second question. What happened in the past 2 elections show a lot of fiscal indiscipline. What will this government be doing to ensure the fiscal slippage won't happen again in 2020 at the back of this performance? Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lady who is already standing. So
all right, thank you very much. My name is Adom-Otchere. I represent the Media General Group. I have 2 questions. The first one, data from the recent held MPC showed that despite a year-on-year growth in revenue as at January 2019, the outturn was slightly below targets for the month. Admittedly, January is too early to draw conclusions about the revenue outlook, but it also showed a continuation of persistent revenue shortfalls. So question is, what has been the impact of the revenue measures implemented last year? And are we too bullish about our revenue projections, which is why we are consistently recording shortfalls? My very last question. Following last year's banking sector cleanup, government had to incur a fiscal cost of at least, and from Dr. Baumia's presentation, 12 billion cedis to close the assets and liabilities gap. With the anticipated cleanup in the microfinance and specialized deposit-taking institution sector, what is government's estimated fiscal cost, and how soon should we expect the green light for the Bank of Ghana to commence the cleanup? Thank you.
Thank you. May I kindly encourage all of us to keep the questions simple, 1 each, so that we can take as many as possible. So I'll take 1 gentleman. There's a gentleman there, and I would want to find out if our mothers from the market will also have a question. It can be in any language whatsoever, no problem. We'll be happy to take it. Yes, sir. Please tell us your name and your constituency.
My name is Kwakwen Chibodu. I do marketing for NLA. Your Excellency, let me give you this scenario. My brother and I are giving an X amount to start business. I open a container, and then he goes for a half plot and builds chamber and hall about 5. The first visitor I get is from the AMA. They are coming to ask for container fee. And then my next visitor is from GRE, coming to ask for income tax. The irony is that the tax they take for me, government will use it to employ a rent officer to settle cases, to adjudicate cases between my brother's tenants and himself. Meanwhile, he doesn't pay anything. So is the government considering tax on rent? My second thing is, I have my
I'm going to have to stop you there.
No, I have my receipts here. It's about the police. The Interior Minister here, you should listen. Please, please.
Very quickly.
The Interior Minister is here. The personal police, when we talk about vigilantism, they think it's about political vigilantism. The personal police in Accra here are practicing vigilantism. AMA says what they are doing is illegal. Okay. But meanwhile, the issue...
Okay, Chief, thank you. Yes, madam.
Thank you. My name is Adom-Otchere, Japan Motors. I have two basic questions.
You are from Japan Motors.
Japan Motors.
You deal in cars and parts.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I have two basic questions. One on the ports. I'm very excited with the reforms on the ports. But my question has to do with the suspense regime and especially with the warehousing. I realize that most of the time when these reforms are done, they are geared towards the home consumption, where you're paying taxes directly from the port. But then the warehousing regime is left out. I'd like to entreat the economic management team to consider that as well, because there are so many challenges, especially when it comes to bond. There are manual processes, and we find ourselves in an automated era where those processes could also be automated. My second question comes to the automobile industry, where we're having quite a number of brands proposing to come in for assembling. I want an assurance from government that it's a capital-intensive venture, and there should be an assurance to the investors that when they put their money there isn't going to be any government policy, political interference that's going to draw the carpet under them for the investment to go down the drain. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency.
Well, I think that the Minister for Trade and Industry could handle the jobs matter. How all we are doing, how does it translate into jobs? I think the Minister for Finance could take the whole issue of how we are ensuring irreversibility, how revenues are below target, whether we are too bullish, and also the banking sector reform. He has a lot on his plate. Yeah, so we can start with those.
Thank you, Excellency. I think the issue of jobs is fundamental to what we've been listening to this morning. Now, the experience from almost all the matured economies in the world point to one thing, that if you want to create jobs on a sustainable basis, you have to be able to industrialize. And that is why we've embarked on a very aggressive program for industrial transformation, probably never ever seen in this country since independence. You're talking about working with the private sector to ensure that at least in every district in Ghana, that will support the private sector to establish one major industrial processing facility. Beyond that also, we are working with the private sector. And please, the emphasis is not on government starting state enterprises. This is on supporting the private sector to do these things. So apart from the 1D1F, I'm sure you are also aware that in every region, government is supporting, again, the private sector to create these industrial enclaves, which will provide the ecosystem for industries, both local and external, to locate. This cannot happen by chance. You have to create a system that will attract investments into the productive sectors of the economy. That's how you create jobs. Even in the United States of America, they are talking about industrialization, manufacturing, because they need to be able to create jobs. And I could go on and on. We have a very ambitious program for export development, not focusing on only cocoa and gold, but expanding non-traditional exports. That is also going to be an entry point for job creation. But I think, and of course, my brother from the Ministry of Agriculture, planting for food and jobs, it's also another entry point for job creation. But, Excellency, if I may just spend a minute to put the whole essence of what we've been listening today, this morning, and how it relates to job creation. Now, when you inherit an economy that has significant challenges, your primary task is to stabilize the economy. That is the fundamental objective that you have to pursue. And for you to stabilize the economy, you need to be able to restrain expenditure and then ensure that you don't spend what you do not have. And as soon as you pursue such a policy, obviously because you are not embarking on public expenditure, there will be a constriction of jobs. But we have no choice but to do that in order to create the foundation and the environment for the jobs to be created, for investments to come, for the jobs to be created. So I think that what we've done, and I needed to explain this, that we started, of course, we could have started talking about only job creation. But as the Americans will say, it ain't going to happen unless you have a stable macroeconomic environment. Nobody is going to invest in your country, whether domestic or external. So that is why you've seen that there's been a focus on the stabilization of the macroeconomy. You've also realized from this presentation that as we focused on macro stabilization, we also wanted to ensure that certain social services that are fundamental to reduce the burden on the ordinary Ghanaian also being addressed. Free education, national health insurance, all those are public sector investments. So meanwhile, whilst you are doing this, you are taking money away from maybe supporting the private sector, which ordinarily would have increased the level of job creation faster. But as the Vice President said, if you want sustained development in any country, you have no choice but to create a condition that will generate the jobs over a very long period of time. So now that you have 2 years of sustained macroeconomic improvement, because without that improvement, you cannot exit from the IMF. You cannot just go and say, I want to leave, and then they allow you to leave, because you have certain commitments. Now that we've been able to get that clean bill of health, and now that we've been able to address some of the social interventions, this is the time when you are going to see private sector booming, because the foundation has already been created. So if today we are announcing all these measures that would facilitate trade, that would expand investments, then you can understand that it needed to come at this time when we know that the environment has been created. So I thought that I should look at it. Maybe I can just add on the auto policy.
Yes, please.
Again, when you talk about industrial development, there's been so much focus on one district, one factory. But that is only a small part of what we are doing. We apart from the 1D, 1F and the industrial parks, I'm sure you've heard about Ghana identifying a number of new strategic growth pillars for Ghana. For over 50 to 70, 80 years, we've been depending on only cocoa and gold. For how long can you as a country depend on only two commodities to fuel your transformation? That's not sustainable. And that's why we've identified new strategic sectors of growth. When the Vice President talks about the integrated bauxite and aluminum industry, that is a major entry point for job creation, upstream, downstream. Iron and steel, another major entry point for job creation. If you have steel and you have aluminum and you have plastics, which is what comes out of your petrochemical industry, then that's the basis for a very vibrant, I would say, construction environment. But we are going beyond these traditional sectors, and we've talked about the auto sector. Without even putting any public investments into this auto sector, just by policy signaling, this is the first time in, I would say, in Africa, where a government has been able to identify a new sector for growth, and you see such significant response from the major investors in this sector. And so when you hear about Nissan, you hear about VW, Volkswagen, you hear about Renault, you hear about Suzuki, and you hear about Toyota, all at the same time seeking to invest in these sectors, then, my sister, you can be assured that these major players will not respond just to a policy signal if they didn't have confidence in the policy that the government was introducing. So I think that, as the lawyers will say, the matter speaks for itself. Thank you, Excellency.
Minister for Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. And thank you very much for the question. I think the professor from KNUST, I think asked a very important and niggling question that Ghanaians have and investors have. Are we going to have sort of policy reversals which would lead to a return to the IMF? The president has declared that this is the 16th one, and never again are we going to do that. And never again are we going to do that. And I think, what transpired last week when we went to the bond market was an indication of the confidence in the economic management team and the resoluteness of where Ghana is going. But beyond that, knowing that it's a democracy and therefore you might or may not be in government, we went ahead to legislate this. And this is where the Vice President was indicating that we have the Fiscal Responsibility Rule, the Fiscal Advisory Council, and the Financial Stability Council, so that we begin to anchor ourselves. And in that was the limitations of 5% for the deficit and a positive primary balance to ensure that the rate of accumulation of debt is reduced. It also means that we will not come into government in 2017 and inherit a deficit of 9.3. So whatever we do, you then operate within a band of reasonableness, irrespective of the government that is in play. I think that's very important and crucial. In addition to that is also the establishment of the Economic Planning Coordinating Committee at the Ministry of Finance, to be chaired by both the Governor and the Minister of Finance. And in that will be to ensure that we follow through with policies that we intend to keep and constantly give confidence to the market as to where we are going. I can assure you that never again would we go back. On the issue of 2020, I saw a cartoon showing the Vice President going to India to kind of hold down the city. We don't have to do that. We actually have the senior minister who was one of the first ministers to ensure that in election year he actually did not go into a deficit. So with his presence, wisdom, and encouragement, we won't do that. But even before that, as the Vice President mentioned, we are pushing ahead of an aggressive infrastructure plan. The Sino-Hydro transaction that he brought to the country, which means that we don't have the pressures in 2020 to do anything untoward. And that is how we are looking to manage this. On the question of the outturn for our revenues, interesting. We do encourage ourselves to overperform. But even if you look at what we inherited at, I think maybe it was 31 billion odd for revenue in 2016, and we are now at a 60 billion total target. So even this period in which we beat ourselves down, we are almost about 90% of where we are, whilst revenues actually have moved from about 52, whilst expenditures have moved from about 52 to 70, which means a 40% increase. So you can see, what we are trying to do with managing the economy. But clearly, there's a lot more to be done with revenue. Because on the other hand, if you look at where we are at about 12% of GDP, which is way below our peer countries, we should be anywhere from 15 to 18. So that in there, you know, is another maybe odd 20 billion that we can get. Not necessarily from GRA, but maybe with taxing rent and with all of us in the informal market, you know, paying. I think April 15th is tax day. I wonder how many of you have filed your personal taxes. and that all goes to the issue of the citizens' responsibility and the Republic and what we must each do and to participate in this transformation agenda. With regards to the banking issue, yes, we do intend to tackle the microfinance one. I think the estimate is around 953 of 53 odd million CDs that we actually have put in an escrow account to be able to tackle that. And then there's the SDIs, which is the savings and loans institutions, etc. And approximate is about 3 billion that it will cost us. So we need a plan to get through that. Mr. Vice President, thank you.
Senior Minister, Minister for Planning, go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, I think what the Finance Minister didn't tell the people about this fiscal responsibility rule is that if he violates it, or any of us attempts to violate that 5% rule, he will be sanctioned by Parliament. So it means that if you are going beyond 5%, you have to face the law in the House. And that can mean maybe not jail, but at least, you know, just close to something very terrible. So it is actually, there is a sanction regime to prevent the finance minister or even any other minister who will actually push him to go beyond the 5% to really be brought to the House for sanctioning. And we think that one will actually settle the 2020. There will be no excess of the deficit over the 5% that has been fixed. Thank you.
Senior Minister, the question was whether we should decentralize the EMT.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President and Chairman of the EMT. There is always one chief examiner per subject. The reason is that you want to ensure consistency. Now, if you decentralize the EMT in terms of persons, you are going to create a problem. What would be the equivalent of the Minister of Finance if you decentralize in the northern region or you decentralize in the Volta region? What is important is that if you listen to Professor Mwaku very carefully, he said we invite agencies, we invite line ministers, we invite the private sector to listen to their problems and assist them resolve it in respect of promoting the economy. So we members of the EMT should be ready to move to the regions and sit and let people appear before us and listen to local problems so that we can, using the same brain power, find answers to the problems in a decentralized manner. We have been sitting so far only in Accra, and I think it's a warning that we should decentralize our sitting so that we come close to the problems and resolve them. So I think I urge respect to the Vice that we must be ready to move. It is a very important suggestion because some problems are local and you may never get close to them if you are always in Accra. So yes, we decentralize the sitting, but not the membership.
Thank you very much, Senior Minister. That's why he has more gray hair than us. Yes, I think there was a question on the suspense regime for warehousing. It's from a lady from Japan Motors. It's something that we are looking at. I think we are examining that as well as part of all the reforms, so they wouldn't be left behind. So we can take the next set of questions.
My name is Henry Anim Somwa. I'm a concerned farmer. I'm really impressed with the brains we have on the economic management team, and especially their background in economics. I'm a student of economic history, and countries that has transformed using agriculture has gone through a phase we are in today. And the transformation and the wind blowing, we need to also look at agriculture. Fundamentally, if I use price support, input price support, to support agriculture modernization, the economic management will understand this language. The deadweight losses would always be higher than the consumer welfare. Secondly, it is going to be difficult for financial management. And I think Ghana has experienced that since 2008. So my question is, what transformation are we doing in agriculture to ensure that the gains from planting for food and jobs will not be eroded, but rather would lead to private sector investments that would modernize agriculture for me and my younger brothers? Thank you.
Your Excellency, the Vice President, my name is Christiana Lai from Makola Market Traders Association. Yesterday, my colleagues gave me a long list of questions, but it seems you've answered all the questions. I have a long list here, but I wish to thank you very much. And I'm pleading with you that tomorrow by this time, all that you've promised should be fulfilled. Thank you very much. And I'm going back to tell them that Asempape Biayati, Oje, Oje, Oje. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Sena Dake from the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Ghana. My question is, when will we have a woman financial management brain as part of the economic management team? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we sort of have a number of questions which we can. I'll go to the Minister for Food and Agriculture to talk about how to ensure that we will not lose any gains from the planting for food and jobs.
Thank you, Excellency. Dr. Somwa is a concerned farmer, he says. But I know that he's more than a concerned farmer, very much into agriculture. The question is how to protect the gains made through planting for food and jobs that the EMT is very much concerned about. Dr. Somwa, I can assure you that the commitment not only of the EMT, but of this government to agriculture is total. I spent 8 years in a position in Parliament talking on behalf of party in Parliament. And I saw the kinds of policies which were adopted which did not get us anywhere with our agricultural performance. This government has come on and is tackling the problems at its roots. That is to say, the majority of farmers who are only small farmers, 1 hectare, 2 hectares, they are the ones that we have targeted to support initially. The fact of the matter is that in terms of the improved seed and fertilizer, only about 10% of Ghanaian smallholders do use these two major inputs. And that is one of the reasons why Ghana has one of the lowest productivity in agriculture. You take yields of any crop, including our own cocoa, we are doing very badly. And this is why this government has decided that we'll tackle the problem with the smallholders who still produce over 90% of our agricultural output. And not just by rhetoric. You look at the amount of resources that are going into the smallholder sector compared to previous years. You cannot even begin to compare. That we have, for the first time, 2017, when we came on, we're able to distribute over 250,000 metric tons of fertilizer to smallholders. And the highest before then have been only 150,000, and this figure has been going up in the 2 years since. That this year we are targeting over 350 to 380,000 metric tons of fertilizer distribution to these farmers, and also to increase the amount of seeds, improved seeds that we are giving to these farmers. And within that, we are emphasizing specific crops, like rice, for instance, which is costing us nearly $1.5 billion to import. We are determined that in the next 3-4 years, we will no longer import rice. We're targeting it both in the traditional areas of the savannah and in the forest areas of the 6 regions in the southern part of the country, where there's huge potential for rice, which has been lying there unexploited. This government is doing something very fundamental about that.
I think there was also a question on when there will be a woman on the EMT. The advice has been well received. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is about the health insurance. Yeah, I'm Nana Onyame from Guta Kumasi. The government is doing well. Catching up duties and all those things. But when I clear my goods from the port, I supply to the hospitals. And the National Health Insurance to pay the hospitals, so that they also pay me. They don't pay. So you also intend not to supply again. And if a patient goes to the hospital, they'll write even APC or common gloves to go and buy from the counter. They bring it to my shop. Method gloves, but the examination gloves is packed. In one pack is 100 pieces inside. So you can't open it and give them 2 or 3. So you're supposed to buy the whole packet, and it will go waste. So I'm pleading to the government, if they have digitized the NHS card, they should also pay the suppliers or the hospitals so that they can also pay the suppliers so that the government business will go on smoothly, as the Kufu administration was doing before. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the Vice President. I know we are aware that in Ghana, we have religious bodies, which is now we call Ghana Conference of Religion for Peace. I would suggest that when there is a time you sit down to see certain things in Ghana, I would plead that you should think of the religious bodies, the Ghana Conference of Religions for Peace, GCROP, and I will be very happy about that. So I suggest that this economic management team, I would like to see the religious bodies on it.
Your Excellency, the economic management team, I think I will speak on the exchange rate depreciation.
Can we have some silence in the hall, please?
I just want to find out that when you travel outside the country, and I believe all of us are very much aware, it's very, very difficult to change dollars in those respective countries. For example, even South Africa, you cannot change dollars into rand there. A lot of countries are practicing this. What can Ghana do to also avert some of these problems? Again, are we regulating the black market operators also? How are we regulating them? It's very sad that we go to Tudu and other areas, you find them selling these hard currencies on the streets of Accra as if we're selling, excuse me to say, tomatoes. How are we going to regulate their activities? If we're able to even regulate them as well, we might even have some sort of taxes from them, because it looks as if all of them are running away from the tax net. So what are we doing to regulate their activities?
Your Excellency, your government indeed is a listening one. Whatever you said here was as if you were saying the same things that I've been saying on air. It means that whatever thing I say on air, it registers in your head.
But who are
and
you?
then
Please
you find
introduce
solution.
yourself properly.
I am the president of Ghana Union of Traders Association, Dr. Joseph Obing. Your Excellency, you have given us paperless system which saves us time-related cost. And now you have given us real value cost reduction. And we do appreciate. We thank you and your ever accessible EMT. We thank the president himself for this kind gesture. We thank the Council of State, through whose intervention we've gotten this stage. A great lesson learned here is that positive dialogue is the key to good governance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is there a question following that so that I can take a few?
Yeah, okay, let me run it. I wanted to say something.
Very quickly, there are several questions.
Okay, what I want us to do is, as soon as possible, arrange with customs and GRA to make out the modalities so that we can quick start it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Siawan Padu from Adom-Otchere, co-chairman of Adom-Otchere Spare Parts Association. Your Excellency, on behalf of traders from Adom-Otchere, we say thank you very much for having listened to this brilliant presentation. Indeed, you are a listening government. But I have one challenge. That is foreigners issue. We've been talking, quarreling, fighting over the years about foreigners who are taking over our businesses. Retail trading. When you go to Kumasi Swami, Circle, Adom-Otchere, Okaishi, Sunya, all over. If your rent is due, you cannot take over the shop again because the foreigner is there marking time, taking over your businesses. And we are not saying the foreigners should go back to their countries because they do a whole on of mine. So please, Your Excellency, what measures are you going to put in place so that we, the retailers, will do our trading or remain in the business forever? Thank you very much.
The Ghana Union of Traders Associations and the Ministry of Trade and Industry have been working actively on this matter. And I'm sure that the fact that there's not that much tension in the retail trade arena, I think it's a reflection of the contribution of GUTA in particular in supporting government to find a way of addressing the influx of foreigners in our retail trade on a sustainable basis. Now, I can say also that this matter now is before Parliament. Parliament has established a joint committee of the Select Committee on Trade and Industry and Tourism, and then Defense and Security, for this matter now to be interrogated on a more permanent basis. So I can assure you that it is under very serious and active consideration, and hopefully that will find a permanent solution to this challenge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. That observation is really true and very important. Yesterday, I tried to change dollars in Dakar into their currency. My passport was taken, details were taken from the passport, etc., etc. And you couldn't just put the dollar there and be given the equivalent in the CFA. In Ghana, however, people are trading in our currency and in the dollar without any supervision and regulation. And this is undermining the economy. And I think Bank of Ghana, the EMT, should sit together with the security agents to look at the current laws governing this exchange rate business. Forest belows are governed by and controlled by Bank of Ghana, and they have rules of operation. These people are not forest bureaus, but they are operating as if there are no rules and regulations in Ghana. And Mr. Vice President, I think this is wrong. And we should handle the national security so that we apply the rules which all other countries do. When you go to a country and you want to exchange dollars for that currency and vice versa, you must go through some regimentation. In Ghana, it is not so, and therefore it is not right. And I think your observation is well in that. Members of the EMT has been talking about it, but we need that cooperation between the EMT, Bank of Ghana, and the security agencies to put a stop to this illegal business. It is illegal because they are not forest bureaus. So I think it's a warning to us, and we take your challenge and assure you that by the middle of this month, today's date, 3rd, by middle of this month, Bank of Ghana and the National Security Agency will come out with some guidelines so that we take steps to protect our currency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Senior Minister. One of the things about the French countries around us is that they are very formalized in terms of identity. Everybody has a unique identity, and you cannot do any type of transaction without your national ID number attached to it. In a situation where we are so informal, it's a bit more difficult, whether it's SIM card registration or forex cases and so on. But I believe that once we conclude the national ID card, our system will be more enforceable with all of these regulations. I think the religious bodies, the Ghana Conference for Religions for Peace, I think you are requesting a membership of the EMT. The Senior Minister will also handle it.
I think the EMT members must be happy that the religious group want to join us. And I think it shows that they admire the type of job we are doing and the areas we are covering. So will the Ghana Institution of Engineers, so will the Ghana Bar Association, so will many of the other professional and religious bodies want to. And it cannot be done that way. What we do and what we have done is to also invite some of you to meet us to discuss your concern and to take your input in managing the economy. I think the secretary to the EMT is here. I will let him take your details, and I think along the line we invite you to meet the whole group, and we will continue to dialogue with you and any other group who are interested in having an input into the EMT.
His Excellency, my name is Kwekutimin. I believe one of the ministers who have not spoken today is John Peter Amewu, and if it comes to energy, the key issue is Dumso. I want to find out, His Excellency, we are a beautiful country that generates over 4,000 megawatts. We have the capacity. However, we use just about 2,700. So how come my power intermittently goes off? And then I have the assurance that I can also export to other neighboring countries. When I put the mathematics together, I simply don't understand. So, Honorable Minister, please come and answer these questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
My name is Kojo Yankson. I'm from Joy News. Earlier, when you were taking us through some of the figures of how the economy is looking, I was alarmed to notice that we had spent about 3.2% of our GDP bailing out banks. But what alarmed me even more was the knowledge that those who presided over this catastrophe are still walking around. Some of them are still being paid by us, the taxpayers, whose money went into bailing out these banks. So can you please tell us what you plan to do about this and why we haven't seen any action against these individuals so far? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Moy.
Wide huge install capacity of 4,700 and over, with a peak demand of just about 2,600, yet still we have intermittent shortfall in supply? That's a very brilliant question. Mr. Vice President, our energy mix in this country cuts across hydro, renewable in terms of sun, gas, which is the thermal, and also light crude oil, and also heavy fuel and diesel. In our current tariff that we are paying, the tariff has been driven largely because out of this energy mix, large proportion being priced on gas. If we are going to turn on a plant that is going to be fed on heavy fuel or light crude oil or diesel, that will bring an added cost to the existing tariff regime. Largely about 660 megawatts of our plants relied on gas. So when we shut down the gas plant at Takoradi to make provisions for the tie-in that we are undertaking, it means all these plants that are relying on gas, Ameri, TICO, KTTB, will no longer have access to feed on gas. But what we have done is through the benevolence of the Ministry of Finance, sufficient fund was made available to procure light crude oil, diesel, heavy fuel for plants that relied on both gas and fuel. Some plants are dualized. When the plant is dualized, what it means is that it can feed both on light crude or gas. All these plants that I've mentioned do not have that capacity. They only rely on gas. So the shortfall we are seeing currently, it's as a result of the migration largely from the gas-fired plant to the light crude, heavy fuel, and then also the diesel plant. We have sufficient diesel currently in the stock of Tema Oil Refinery and most of this plant. I want to assure Ghanaians and also all the listeners gathered here, the participants, that first of all, we want to apologize for this intermittent supply, but we are never back to the era where we have consistent, persistent shortfall in supply. We are in an era that there is installed capacity available, but what we need to do is to change that installed capacity to availability. As a government, we continue to pay for gas that is available but cannot be used. As government, we continue to pay for heavy fuel to fire a plant that can equally rely on gas for cheaper source of fuel. And so what His Excellency has directed we do is to move the plants that are feeding on heavy fuel from Tema to Takoradi. The question one will ask is, if you have sufficient gas in Takoradi, why would you go and put a plant in Tema? I don't want to answer those questions. Ghanaians should be able to answer it. If I have the opportunity, then I will not put the plant in Tema. I will put the plant near to the source of gas. Because when the gas travels from Takoradi to Tema, it is also not free. It costs about $2.7 dollars per MMBTU just for the tariff. For 1 month, the traveling cost of gas will cost this country in a range of about $60 million US. That is just the tariff for the volume of gas that you shipped from Takoradi to Tema. The best thing, therefore, is that to avoid this cost, let us move the plant from Tema to Takoradi. This is a very good management idea. Mr. Vice President, the stranded gas, as I have talked about, also means that you have gas, but again, you are feeding on other expensive fuel. So what do? Because some of the plants are still in Tema that you cannot move, The only ones we are moving are the mobile ones. There are some that are fixed. You cannot move them. What do you have to do? Okay, those that are fixed, let's therefore move some gas from Takoradi to the fixed plant. That again is cheaper because it reduces the cost more than 7%. And so it calls for what we call the tie-in. The tie-in just allows us to be able to flow gas. Currently, we can flow gas from Nigeria through Tema to Takoradi, but you cannot flow gas in the reverse direction. So the current tie-in just allows us to move the stranded gas to Tema. By doing so, we have to stop the flow of gas. The stoppage of the flow of gas take away almost about 650 megawatts of power plant. This explains the intermittent shortfall that we have witnessed. Fortunately, Mr. Vice President, I have an opportunity to visit the site, and I can assure the good people of this country that work is progressing. The best thing we can do is to make sure that we speed up this process. And I can assure them that by the 12th of April, we will complete the tie-in. What good thing is this tie-in also doing? We are not only just tying, cutting, and joining as people estimate. We have also begun to expand the current capacity of 130 to over 405 standard cubic meters of gas per day. That is one expansion that we've done. Another thing we have also done is to provide opportunities for the future, because we are forward-looking government. We are not looking at elections. We are looking at the future. So we begin to provide opportunities for future expansion. The government idea of one district, one factory had made us to add more valves so that in future, power agencies or other industries that want to rely on gas can easily tap in without shutdown. Without shutdown, because we are learning from our experience. So Ghanaians, we are sorry, this short period is just intermittent. And I can promise you that from 12th of April, when the tie-in is completed, you will continue to enjoy sustainable use of your power. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. It looks like you were expecting the question. You answered it so well. Thank you very much. We have a question, maybe the Minister for Finance, on the bailout and the people who are walking around free. So what do you want to say on that?
Mr. Vice President, I certainly don't look like the AG, but I think it's an issue that the central bank is dealing with and has sent all the appropriate information that it needs to send to the security agencies. So like you, we spend, some 12 billion CDs or so in that. And it's 12 billion that I'd rather use for other things, such as capital expenditure. There was a question on capital expenditure, and I think we are spending about 4.3% of our GDP currently.
Yes.
But if you look at what we are going to add of Sino-Hydro, that's another 2%. And then we are also securitizing Get Fund to be able to get resources. That's another 1.5 billion. So that takes us to over 9%. Now, there's also now a real philosophical issue about how to categorize education and whether it is just goods and services or whether it is real capital expenditure. And I think the thinking is beginning to feel clearly that that's capital X. And that's why the president pushed on all of these issues of senior high and how to get technical education for us. Because with that is really the rubric of the infrastructure that we need for the future. So when you look at it, you say that we may be even close to 10% or more as we are currently doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I just want to ask this from the Energy Minister, that whilst we are waiting for these 12th April thing, can't you or the energy sector give us a schedule so that we will be aware when our power would go off and when our power will come? And again, to the Vice President, your microeconomic indicators were good, but I want to ask that, of course, when we go out, the opposition is going to say that you said a lot, But the question is, how is it translating into our pockets? So please tell us how these indicators would actually translate into our pockets.
Mr. Vice President, yes, we've directed the various agencies to provide information to areas that would not experience lights being on. Mr. Vice President, it's also important to know that these agencies have their own internal mechanism. For instance, I'm told in Ashanti region, most of these areas have already been informed prior to the shutdown. I'm quite surprised why some of the areas are not receiving those information here in Accra, because I always have it on my notice. They send me a notice that these areas would not, be able to experience a light on. But Mr. Vice President, we still insist, from looking at the participants, the need, we still insist that we intensify, some work so that the people who will be out of light, of course, they will be made to be aware that they will not experience light during the period.
Thank you very much. Minister for Monitoring and Evaluation, we say we have good macroeconomic indicators, and how do we translate that into the pockets of people?
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice. I thought you would give it to the Minister of Finance. But since you've asked me to, I'll try and mention a few areas. I pay a lot of school fees in my constituency. And I know that since the free SHS came, the number of people coming to me for school fees has gone down. So in my pocket, at least, I can feel it. And I'm sure a lot of parents are feeling it. It is true that when the macro fundamentals are good, we expect it to translate into the micro. I think Honorable Adom-Otchere tried to tell us that the time is coming for all of us to feel it in our pockets. We needed to stabilize the macro. But once you get jobs, you'll be feeling it in your pocket. Thank you.
Of Bali United. For Jakarta, if they lose...
Good Evening Ghana is brought to you by Castlegate Company Limited.